Hi everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and start recording for today's video. So today we're going to be going over the immune system and the muscular system. So I had a couple of really good questions from you guys concerning these notes and what we're going to be doing every day. So first off, I should have probably told you where I was going to be putting those notes. So if you go to your Schoology page, and you can see I just pulled up, a random classes Schoology page. So if you look right here, okay, there's a red folder entitled Interactive Notes. And so in this, okay, this is where your body system notes are going to be. So when you click on that, you'll have a document pull up, an assignment that you'll be able to go ahead and fill out. So as you're filling out those notes, you will not be submitting them. Okay, so they're not going to be due until next Friday. So do not submit them. I will go ahead and unsubmit anybody who's submitted them already. And so you'll just be filling these out throughout this week and next week, and then that'll be turned in for a completion grade. So if you're ever wondering what body systems or where these videos are located, or what we did for the day, that's where you're going to go to this folder where it says week of whatever. And you can see I haven't put today's up yet. But here's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and it'll have in here your instructions and then your video. Okay, I went ahead and put the video in an Ed puzzle just to make it easier. It's a little bit easier to do Ed puzzle than it is YouTube. And, the notes are right there. Okay? Wait for the bell to finish. All right, so what we're going to go ahead and do, okay? Let's see. All right. So, okay, I went ahead and switched over for my tabs. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on immune system and not muscular, skeletal system today. So yesterday we did our levels of organization. Okay, so we filled those out. Hopefully you watched yesterday's notes. We also talked about our nervous system. And so today, okay, we're going to talk about our immune system. So usually when we're talking about immune system, we're thinking of white blood cells, things that protect us against any pathogens, the virus that's going around right now, bacteria, fungus, even parasites. That's what our immune system does. It protects us from all of that stuff. And there's a couple of different types of immunities that we can gain. So this first one, okay, innate immunity, everyone has. Okay, so it doesn't matter if you're a baby, if you're an adult, everybody has innate immunity. And with innate immunity, you have a couple of lines of defense. So you have your first line of defense. And so when we're talking about our first line of defense, we're talking about what a virus or a bacteria first encounters in our body. So usually, for example, okay, first encounters are going to be our skin. Okay, because we do, like, everywhere has bacteria and viruses, and so we're always touching them. Okay, it's kind of scary to think about, but we are always touching them. So our skin is going to be one of our first lines of defense, and then obviously our skin doesn't cover everything. Okay, but if we're talking about like our mouth, our nose, even our eyes, those are all kind of like liquidy. Okay, and that's mucus. So our mucous membranes are our first line of defense as well. Even our ears, okay? Whenever you build up earwax, like, and you accumulate a bunch of wax, that's because, that wax is working to block out anything that might be going through your ears. Okay, so all of those mucous membranes are our first line of defense. Our second line of defense, okay, so let's say that we came into contact with a virus or bacteria. Okay, it penetrated our skin because maybe we had a cut or we breathed it in and it made it past those mucous membranes. Our white blood cells are going to be taking care of that. So our second line of defense always has to do with our cells. Okay, so white blood cells, we're going to talk about a couple of special white blood cells here in a bit, but our white blood cells and an inflammatory response. Okay, so if you don't know what inflammation is, that's whenever your system is irritated. So like, let's say, for example, that you became exposed to something that you're allergic to. Okay, so like poison ivy, for example. Everybody's allergic to poison ivy to some extent. So if you get, poison ivy on you, your skin's going to turn red. It may bubble up and swell. That's an inflammatory response. And that's because your body's telling your brain to send all the white blood cells there. So that way, one, it can let you know that, hey, something's wrong. we need to heal this. And then it's also going to send the white blood cells to hopefully try to start healing and destroying any pathogens. So those are our first and second line of defenses. Everybody has those. So acquired immunity, okay, not everybody has this. Okay, so we gain this through exposure. Okay, so either exposure through pathogens, okay, or exposure to the antibodies. Okay, so I have two definitions right here. I have antigen and antibody. So an antigen is a foreign molecule. It's the same thing as a pathogen. So it could be a virus, a bacteria, a fungi, parasite. All of those things are antigens. It's something that's not supposed to be in our body. Our antibodies are what our body produces to attack that antigen. And so that antibody, so like you may have heard for the COVID testing, there are some doctors that test to see if you have COVID antibodies. And what that means, if you have those antibodies, then at some point your body had that virus. You may not have gotten sick, but your white blood cells saw it, and so they produced an antibody. And so that way, if you do see the virus again, your body will recognize it and be able to fight it off. So, when we're talking about this acquired immunity, we can either have exposure to the antigen or have exposure to the antibody. And so we call those active immunity. Okay, so active immunity is when we are exposed to the antigen. Okay, so maybe we got sick, okay, so through illness, or we were vaccinated. Okay, so when we're vaccinated, we see parts of that, that virus or that bacteria, and so, we gain active immunity. Passive immunity is when we are exposed to the antibody. Okay, so a very good example of this is when a fetus gains their mother's antibodies through the placenta. So before the baby's even born, they're going to gain their mother's antibodies. And this is actually one of the reasons why you've probably heard of that discussion about what to feed a baby after it's born. There's a lot of doctors that believe, breast milk is the best because the mother's still giving antibodies to the baby. And sometimes you'll see that babies that, are fed that way are less sick than babies who, have formula. But sometimes you can't help it. Sometimes babies, can't handle that type of milk, and so they need formula milk. So let's keep on going. Okay, I put a little interesting fact here about allergies. So allergies are essentially an inflammatory response that our body does when we come into contact with things that should be normal, like pollen, dust, dust mites. Our body doesn't know what to do with it, and they think that they're antigens, they think that they're foreign bodies, and so we have an inflammatory response. We also have several organs here that are responsible for our immune system. So our adenoids, which are up here, kind of like around our nose area. We have tonsils, which are in our throat, our thymus. Lymph nodes are really big, and so is our bone marrow. And so all of these things are responsible for producing and circulating these white blood cells. That's why sometimes, for example, if you're sick and you go to the doctor's office, they want to feel under your throat to see if those glands are swollen. Because if they're swollen, that means you're producing a lot more white blood cells. Same thing where if you're sick, sometimes you may feel sore under your arms, and that's because your lymph nodes are producing more white blood cells under your arms. And so, you have different parts of your body that are producing these white blood cells. So let's talk about some of these special cells. So I'm only going to go over 4 types. There's a lot more than just 4. My first one I'm going to talk about are B cells. Okay, so B cells make your antibodies. Okay, so those are the ones that are responsible for making antibodies. I also have different types of T cells. I have helper T cells, and those activate B and T cells. And then I have some that are really cool that are called killer T cells. Okay, so killer T cells destroy infected body cells. So if you have a body cell that, has a virus in it or maybe has cancer, then that killer T cell will destroy that body cell. But, sometimes we just have, viruses and bacteria and fungi particles floating around in our body. And so we have these other really cool types of cells called natural killer or NK cells. Okay, so these will destroy any antigens that are in your body. So those are four, pretty big types of, immune cells that we're going to see. Like I said, there's a lot more because there's a lot of different types of pathogens that we can come into contact with. So, okay, hopefully immune system, okay, makes sense. So we're going to go ahead and move on to skeletal system. Skeletal system, is pretty nice and easy. There's not as much to it as there was immune system or nervous system. Okay, so for our skeletal system, our major function is that it's going to aid with structure and support. Oops, misspelled structure. And it works with your muscle system for movement. Okay, that's basically what our skeletal system does. In our skeleton, so if you look right here, okay, there's a lot of different types of bones. And we can actually classify these into four major types. Okay, so we have our long bones. Okay, so that's stuff like our humerus, our radius, and our ulna, our femur, which is our leg. Okay, so femur, humerus. I think I misspelled humerus. Let's see. Humerus, yep. Okay. Radius, ulna. Okay, so things like that. Those are our long bones, the ones that make, our limbs make us long. We also have flat bones. Okay, so flat bones are going to be things like our scapula. Okay, so that's our shoulder. If you ever look at a scapula, it's very flat. And then actually our cranium. Okay, if you ever look at, your skull bone, it's very thin. We have short bones. Okay, so short bones are going to be like our knuckles and that little piece of the tailbone. Okay, so like our knuckles, so we have little tiny bones in our hands and in our knuckles. Okay, so and then our tailbone is right down there. Okay, so a lot of times the short bones have a lot of cartilage attached to them just because they're meant to be flexible. And then lastly, we have irregular bones. Okay, and that's stuff like our vertebrae and our pelvis. Okay, so they're not long, they're not flat, they're usually completely, weird shaped, and they have, all these little structures from muscle attachment. So those are our four types of bones. So if we're looking inside of a bone, and you may have seen this, so those of you that have dogs and have ever given your dog a bone, you've probably seen this. In our bone, we have two different types of tissue. Okay, so we have spongy bone and we have compact bone. So compact bone is hard. Okay, this is where calcium is stored. Okay, and it's actually very heavy. It makes up most of the skeletal weight. And then spongy bone, okay, is very soft, okay, and it has holes there for nutrients, blood, and nerves to pass through. Because if you're thinking about your bones, your bones are tissue. They still need, a blood supply in order to grow. They still need nutrients in order to grow. You have to have nerves there because your body needs to be able to tell you if you have any type of bone damage. So those are our two systems for today. So tomorrow we'll go over our muscular system and respiratory system. And so, I'll have some fun videos that go along with that. That way you can, just kind of see, some of the fun stuff. All right, so email me if you have any questions, and